Better? Okay, so my name is Herman Lentz, and the title of my book is Jewmorous. And people ask how I came up with the title. So first of all, I'm a proud Jew. Second of all, thank you. I think I'm humorous. So when you combine Jew and humorous together, you get Jewmorous. And as brilliant as I think that name is, I really can't take credit for it. I do, but I really can't. Actually, the name came from my daughter-in-law. We were sitting around one night, and I was telling what I thought was we were sitting around, better? We were sitting around one night. So we were sitting around one night, and I was telling what I thought was a humorous story, which I think I often do, and she didn't understand it, which also happens very frequently when I think I'm telling a funny story. And she said, I don't get it. And I said, Allison, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to be humorous. And she turned to me and she said, you're trying to be Jewmorous? I don't. And I said, wait, stop. I just heard the greatest, worst pun ever, Jewmorous. And I realized at that point in time, I had a title for my book. So the next day, I called up my attorney, Lipschitz and Lipschitz, to make sure I didn't have to pay her any royalties. And he said, no, just, include her in the acknowledgments. So that's how it worked out, and that's how I got the title for my book. For complete disclosure, Allison has not read my book. While I was writing the book, I would hand out chapters to family and have them read and critique it. And my book is somewhere between PG-13 and R. Kind of a lot closer to R than PG-13. And she would read a chapter or two, or she actually would start with a paragraph or two, and she would just tap out right away. So when I published the book, and I did that last September, and I sold her a copy, look, I'm a struggling author, and I gave her the family discount, no shipping, no handling, but she ended up only reading the table of contents, the acknowledgments at the end. So the subtitle for my book is a collection of stories that prove I'm full of shtick. And I'm so happy to be in front of a Jewish audience where I don't have to explain what shtick is. I was blessed to be born with a Jewish Ashkenazi brain. Now, there's an old joke out there, and it's not my joke, so please don't take offense. The shortest books in the world, for example, The List of Ethical Lawyers. And I apologize to any lawyers. Italian War Heroes, The Collection of German Humor, famous Jewish basketball players. Well, I want to take the converse of that. What would one of the longest books in the world be? And that would be a book of Jewish comedians. George Burns, Jack Benny, Henny Youngman, Rodney Dangerfield, Neil Simon, Lenny Bruce, Sid Caesar, the Marx Brothers, Don Rickles, Buddy Hackett, up to Jerry Seinfeld. The list goes on and on and on. And I have to mention, my own personal comedic trinity, which would be a young Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, and of course, Larry David. The brilliance of these men as a writer, as a comedy writer, as hopefully a humorous writer, I am in awe of the talent of these men and these people. So, what is Jewish humor? Jewish humor is very diverse. It most frequently consists of wordplay, irony, satire, gallows humor, and being self-effacing. With everything that is going on in the world today, in politics, in Israel, we need our sense of humor, and we especially need our Jewish sense of humor. My shtick is that I am a card-carrying, devout narcissist who pretends to act humble. In my stories, I play the role of hero, victim, sometimes both. And my humor is very self-deprecating. In fact, I deprecate all over myself many times in my stories. So let me tell you a little bit what Jewmorous is, my shtick is, and what Jewmorous is about. It's a coming-of-age story from a Long Island Jewish perspective. The fact that it took me 69 years to come of age is a cross that I have to wait. This is the Jewish crowd. The fact that it took me 69 years to come of age is something that has put my therapist children through private universities. I am sure I'm a Long Island Jew, and I am sure a lot of you have had similar experiences growing up and know what it's like to be a Long Island Jew. The school year would end on a Friday. The name tags would already be sewn on, the camp trunks would be packed, and Saturday morning we'd be being schlepped off to summer camp for the next 8 weeks. I can even go back probably further than that. My mother's first trimester of being pregnant with me, she started telling me how special that I was. We all had a bar and bat mitzvah ceremony that could have been staged by Cecil B. DeMille's for its scope and grandeur. I remember family discussions on which hotel at the Catskills we should stay at. My parents preferred the never-ending supply of cream and pickled herring at Grosinger's, where I just found the cheese and cherry blitzes at Butcher's to die for. I hated Passover. Passover to me was the worst holiday. As soon as we opened up the wine-stained, tattered Maxwell House Haggadahs, I'd go to page 6 and start reading the phonetic version or practicing the phonetic version of the 4 questions, and no matter how hard I tried, I always blew the 3rd or 4th question. Or counting ahead to page 18 to see how long it would be before we could eat. During the 10 plates, spilling wine on my bubby's tablecloth and getting yelled at for that. But to me, the absolute worst was when we were reading in sequential order, and my father would stop and point to me to read the portion of The Simple Son. Going to Hebrew school 3 days a week up until the weekend I was bar mitzvah, and still not being able to read, write, or speak a word of Hebrew. Sunday night temple youth group, where young Jewish boys prove their manhood over the killing fields of the ping pong table. Friday nights, not making eye contact with any other members of the congregation at the Shanghai Pavilion Chinese restaurant, but knowing if they ever needed a minion, they could call that place and they'd have more than enough people showing up. And for me, personally, it was my fantasizing about dating a Catholic high school cheerleader. I grew up going to a conservative temple, and I later switched to Reform Judaism. And I found Reform Judaism to be absolutely great. It's Judaism light, same great traditions, a lot less guilt. My first year at the Reform Temple, I was a little bit taken aback that the Rosh Hashanah services was only one day, because I didn't think one day was enough time for me to atone for all of my sins for the previous year. But what really sold me on Reform Judaism was Yom Kippur, because immediately after the morning services in the back of the catering hall, they had a brunch, which I thought was really a very nice touch. I also learned a very valuable lesson going to the Reform Temple the first year. In the middle of services, a member of the congregation had a heart attack. And from the bima, the rabbi made an announcement, and he said, "Is there a doctor in the congregation?" And about 12 doctors came running up to go help out. So the rabbi made a second announcement and said, "Only interventional cardiologists, please come forward." So a bunch of doctors sat down, 3 came up. Unfortunately, none of them participated in the member's HMO, and he had a very high deductible and out-of-network benefit. So there was a little discussion going on, but eventually everything worked out okay. So the lesson I learned is, if you're going to have a heart attack, either have it in the ER or in temple during the high holy days. The other thing I want to mention, and it almost changed my special status with my mother, is that I'm married to a first-generation Greek woman. And, you know, the conversation went, Mom, I'm bringing home my girlfriend Thalia for you to meet for the first time. Well, she is Orthodox. What I failed to mention is that she was not the good Orthodox, she was Greek Orthodox. So the joke I would tell afterwards is that my mother had to be rushed to the hospital because she went to the bathroom and took an overdose of Mahjong tiles after she went to As a devout narcissist, there are a few themes that permeate the stories of my book. I hate my first name, Herman. Are there any other Hermans in the audience tonight? Because I've only met 6. No, okay. It's my life story. I'm on the endangered species list. There's an unconfirmed rumor another Herman has been spotted at the Gin Rummy Room at Del Boca Vista Phase 5, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. As per the Jewish tradition, I was named after my paternal grandfather, who passed away a month before I was born. The more interesting story is about my paternal great-grandfather. Somewhere in Europe, while being chased by Cossacks, and I like to romanticize and think it's the village of Anatevka from Fiddler on the Roof, overworked, underfed Anatevka. My paternal great-grandfather, Abraham, he was in his 50s and his first wife died. So the local matchmaker, let's call her Goldie, hooked him up with a 16-year-old orphan who had no other prospects. Well, Abe had 11 children with his first wife. Friedel, my paternal great-grandmother, was younger than his youngest child. So they proceeded to have 11 more children, my grandfather being the 22nd. So by the time he came around, they basically were out of good names. When I heard stories about my Abe, I always imagined this barrel-chested, thick-armed man, you know, and very virile. And I finally saw a picture of him, and he was a good 5 foot 1.5, had white hair, a white beard, chaos, wearing a black coat and a black hat. And the most distinguishing thing about him was he had a wall-to-wall smile on his face in the picture. You know, he was not studying the Talmud every night. Now, the same could not be said for Friedel. She was not a happy camper. What else about my book? I am very vain about my hair, and I apologize to the follically challenged tonight. Last year was my 50th high school reunion, and I debated about going back. And it wasn't to renew old acquaintances. It was basically to show off my hair. And, you know, some people go on diets. I was timing out my haircut so it would be perfect. And I imagined myself arriving fashionably late, carrying a little fan, walking around, flicking my head back a number of times, then departing. Ultimately, I decided not to go. I had some really bad breakups in high school, which were strictly my fault. I was not the same self-actualized person that I am today. And I didn't know how long the statute of limitations or restraining orders held for, so I ultimately decided not to go. My sons did not inherit my hair gene. They got my sense of humor, much to their wife's chagrin, but not my hair gene. And I told them, I love you guys more than anything else. I will give you a kidney, parts of my lung, a liver. There is no friggin' way you're getting hair plugs. It's absolutely just not happening. Another thing about me, which is in my book, I have skin as soft as a baby's tuchus. I don't do vitamins, I don't take supplements, I don't moisturize. It's because I spent my entire life avoiding physical labor. I am a USDA grade A veal pour some sauce, some cheese, you can Parmesan me and cut me with a butter knife. My avoiding physical labor has been a running battle between me and Thalia. I tried the excuse that if I was ever caught doing yard work by anybody from Temple Bethel, I'd get excommunicated. She did not buy that story at all. The truth is, growing up, I never had to do any of those things. We'd hire a repairman to fix the most minor of problems. We had a gardener to do the yard work. Physical labor was something that was just never going to happen. Growing up for Thalia was very different. Her father was a magician with his hands. If he didn't have a tool, he would build it. So it was very strange for her. So early on in our marriage, I attempted to do these things. And I either would injure myself or I would break something. So Thalia and I have very different definitions of doing work around the house. Her definition is for me to do yard work, which is absolutely ridiculous. My definition is I hire one minority group who brings in a truckload of another minority group, and the only potential of my getting an injury is a nasty paper cut from opening up my checkbook. I attribute this to a disease that I call assemblexia. And assemblexia is not recognized by the American Medical Association. And I'm sure many of you here might also suffer from it and didn't even know you had it. It's a condition that affects Jewish people from the tri-state area. It's our inability to build or fix things. I will not shop in an IKEA. There is just absolutely no point in that happening. I mean, look at these hands. These hands were not made for screwdrivers. They were not made for pliers or hammers. They were designed to caress and fondle. And they're damn good. Now, I think my family has suffered from assemblexia for generations. In Lent's family lore, and that's L-O-R-E, not L-A-W, we share the same accent. Based on generations of assemblexia, when they were building the pyramids in Egypt, my family was allowed to sunbathe on the Nile, which is why the pyramids are still standing today. Finally, one of the most prevalent themes is the clashing of cultures. Thalia and I celebrated our 43rd wedding anniversary last month. We met in August of 1980. She proposed on Valentine's Day the following year. And we were married in June of 1981. We worked out a prisoner exchange program. I would go to church with Thalia on Greek Easter and Christmas, and she would come to temple on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And surprisingly, the families ended up getting along. So Thalia's family would be invited over for Passover, and my family would be invited over for Greek Easter. And Greek Easter would consist of lamb roasting on a spit, moussaka, pasticcio, spanakopita, chiropita, dalmatis, tzatziki. Then after a couple of years, pot roast and potato kugel started appearing at Greek Easter. And the final blow was when sitting next to the baklava was rucola. So now that you know a little bit about my background, I want to read you a story from my book. And this story is from a writing competition that I participated in. And the competition was called Cringe Fest. And you had to tell an embarrassing story from your past. And my problem was, from a lifetime of embarrassing stories, which one should I pick? So I finally decided on a story called Artificial Insemination. In 1986, Thalia and I were having trouble conceiving our first child. As it turned out, my swimmers were not of Olympic caliber. They congregated in the shallow end of the pool, wearing swimming goggles and nose plugs. The best they could do was swim lazily in a circle before drowning. If salmon had the swimming skills of my sperm, my fellow Jews around the world would be eating bagels sans lots. Before learning that my sperm had the energy of cardiac patients in the ICU, each month that we failed to get pregnant was another disappointment. As the months turned into a year, the pressure mounted. We read books on conception, listened to old wives' tales about positions, charted cycles, and monitored Thalia's temperature like a Thanksgiving turkey. We were open to just about anything, and we were relentless. The frequency of our attempts that year, while fun and exhausting, made me think about 13-year-old me. I guess God really had heard my prayers and wishes. After a year of fun and frustration, we finally decided to consult a fertility doctor. Back in 1986, artificial insemination was in its infancy, and the doctors who specialized in it were OBGYNs. They started by testing my semen, and the results were disappointing. I found out that all the money I spent on condoms over the years, ribs, studded, lubricated, glow in the dark, sheer, thin, very thin, ultra thin, flavored, was all a waste. The doctor delicately informed us that we were unlikely to get pregnant the old-fashioned way and recommended artificial insemination. Recent medical innovation allowed my boys to be put right into the deep end of the pool, greatly increasing the odds of conception. To get started, the doctor needed a couple herm sperm for the procedure. We wanted a baby, and I was willing to do anything. No problem, Doc. I'll whip up a batch at home and bring it into the city. But apparently, sperm has a shelf life. And if we stood a chance of seeing a second line on that pregnancy test, we needed the freshest possible sperm. If I sat in bumper-to-bumper traffic in the Lincoln Tunnel or got stuck in the usual New York City gridlock, my swimmers would drown. Instead, she wanted to go from me to a cup to Thalia in real time. Seriously, in the office, Doc? It sounded terrible. But the more I thought about it, I knew I had ample practice in what was being requested of me, so I didn't think it would be a problem. On the big day, we arrived at the doctor's office and joined a dozen women in various degrees of pregnancy who were sitting in the waiting room. The estrogen level was way off the charts. I was proud of what I was doing. I was the before picture in a room full of aftershots. I even amused myself when I realized out, without any fear of being accused of lying or duplicity, I could say that I gave it the office. Finally, the nurse calls my name. It was my time to shine. She handed me a specimen container that looked like it could hold a 7-Eleven Big Gulp, and pointed me to the restroom, which happened to be connected to the waiting room. I said, "It's cool, I don't have to pee first." She shook her head, pointed to me, then immediately to the restroom. I vehemently shook my head no, and she forcefully shook her head yes. Afraid of getting whiplash, I reluctantly entered the restroom. In modern fertility clinics, they have private rooms for sample collection, with magazines, videos, and in my fantasies, hot Asian nurses to assist in the process. But back in 1986, I was in the only laboratory in OBGYN's office full of pregnant women. A woman's body goes through so many changes as she experiences the miracle of creating life. The body contains extra fluid during pregnancy, and as the uterus expands and presses upon the urinary bladder, the expectant mother has to pee a lot and frequently. So, let's do the math. One restroom, 12 pregnant women with bladders about to burst, and me with a specimen jug and a severe case of performance anxiety. The first knock on the door killed whatever momentum I was developing. At the second knock, I said, okay, I need a minute. I pictured a queue of pregnant women waiting by the door, anxiously crossing their legs, which only made the task more difficult. Meanwhile, back in the examination room, Thalia's legs were getting cramped for being up in the air for so long. The next knock and I screams back, I'm in the bathroom, Mom, leave me alone! I need another minute, please. Don't the women realize that knocking on the door was making it harder on the one hand, and on the other hand, it was having the opposite effect? I pictured the receptionist putting down wiggly pads. Finally, mission accomplished. My relief was replaced with panic as my cup did not runneth over. How much should there be? Is there enough? Should I add some water? Do I need to whip up another batch? If so, why can't I be in my teens again? In my imagination, I triumphantly walked to the reception desk, holding the cup in the air like it was the baby Simba in The Lion King. And all the preggers would get up, start swaying, and join me in singing the circle of life. Instead, as I opened the door to the restroom, I was forced to pass a gauntlet of extremely pissed women. I wondered if they felt any compassion for me in my plight, if they could only overlook their own symptoms, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, hemorrhoids, varicose veins, heartburn, indigestion, stretch marks, yeast infections, and backaches, and feel my pain. With total stealth, I handed the container to the receptionist and took the walk of shame back to the seating area with my eyes averted. I wasn't sure what to do. Normally, after sex, even with myself, I would smoke a cigarette and then roll over and go to sleep. That obviously wasn't going to be possible. As I took my seat, I considered that maybe they didn't know what I was actually doing in there. Nah, how could they know? Maybe I'll mention something about a bad burrito I had for dinner last night. Explosive, debilitating diarrhea would be less embarrassing than jerking off in a public restroom. Feeling more confident, I stopped studying the floor and looked up and saw my specimens cup, sitting on top of the receptionist's desk for me to see. Then, I was struck with a horrifying thought. In my haste to free up the restroom, my aim may not have been perfect. Could I have left some of me scattered on the floor, walls, or even the ceiling? I panicked as I thought that one of the pregnant women might slip and fall. I can only imagine the doctor in the ER saying, "You slipped on what, where?" I now needed to pee. I really had to pee. Really, really badly. My bladder was fully dilated, and I was ready to give birth to a lake. I knew better than to attempt a return trip to the restroom. I would be beaten like a piñata by a throng of angry pregnant women. I just had to try my best to hold it in. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finished the procedure and came out to greet me. I could feel 12 sets of eyes staring at me. We both knew what my hand had recently been up to, so I did not follow proper etiquette and declined to send it to shake hers. She told me that the procedure went well, and we'll know soon enough. Great, but to temper my expectations, she added that it doesn't always take the first time. If the first try was unsuccessful, she said that we could repeat this very expensive process again the following month. Since it often takes 4 or 5 attempts before it's successful, I realized that I might be spending a lot of time in that bathroom. Our story does have a happy ending, pun fully intended, and I have to give myself a hand. 1 month later, we found out that one of my boys actually completed the last leg of the journey and made it to the finish line. Thalia was pregnant. And despite the fact that conception began in a bathroom, it is purely coincidental that we named him John. So, now that I've totally embarrassed myself, let me try and redeem myself by saying some positive qualities that I do have. I have 2 sons and 5 grandchildren. My oldest son is an executive chef at a country club in Massachusetts. And people say, wow, it must be great having a son who's an executive chef. The meals he must cook for you. Well, he cooks 5 or 6 times a week, and the last thing he wants to do on his day off is cook a meal. So I really have no problem with that. What's more problematic is going out to eat with an executive chef, because they want to dissect and discuss the meal. And it reached a point where I said, Jimmy, it's a friggin' cheeseburger. 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, onion, sesame seed bun. It's not that complicated. My other son is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. And I'm going to repeat that, not because you didn't hear it, but I have to say it as many times as I possibly can. He is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I am very proud of both of my sons for the men that they've become, the husbands and the fathers. As I said, I have 5 grandchildren. I am a loving grandfather. I remember when my first grandchild was born, Layla, Valley and I drove up to Massachusetts. Both sets of grandparents were brought into the room to see the baby for the first time. I instantly pull out my phone and I'm taking picture after picture, and I've turned into one of those people. It's the same picture with a different person holding the baby over and over again. I have a blister on my thumb, I'm not stopping. Then the nurse walks in and she goes, I'm going to change the first diaper. And all of a sudden, I turn into Herman Spielberg, and I want to film the changing of the first diaper. And I'm going in for close-ups, and I'm panning the crowd, and I'm waiting for the nurse to hold it up in the air to the oohs and ahs of the crowd. And while I'm doing this, I'm saying, what the hell is wrong with you? Now, I didn't stop, but I continued realizing that there was something definitely amiss in my mind. I've done the same, not taking the changing of the first diaper with the other 4 grandchildren, and when Cameron, my last grandchild, was born, immediately after that, I was diagnosed with carpal tunnel syndrome, so I think there's a definite correlation between those events. As I'm sure all of you have experienced, as much as we love our grandchildren, babysitting for them can be challenging at times. Last week we babysat for 2 of our grandchildren. Sally and I weighed in at 138 years of age versus Layla and Logan, who weighed in at 12 years of age, and they totally outmanned us and outnumbered us and kicked our asses. So those are the good qualities. Let me get back to deprecating on myself. Some of the other stories in my book. I'm 69 years old and go for an annual physical every year, and I'm sure all the guys in the audience tonight experience the same thing. We are clenching the entire time, and we are dreading the prostate exam at the end of the physical. Well, my PCP retires. I now had to find a new doctor. So what criteria did I use? Medical school, proximity, fellowship, board certification, no. I wanted to find a doctor with small hands. So I was looking for an Asian doctor or a female doctor. I really love an Asian female doctor. So I went on the Aetna website. And the Aetna website is not like J-Date or Silver Singles. There's no pictures of the doctors there, but I did find an Asian female. My appointment comes up, and how can I tactfully say this? This doctor was not the most attractive or smallest of women out there. We've all seen Viagra commercials, where at the end of the commercial they have the disclaimer at the end that say, if you have an erection that lasts for more than 4 hours, see a doctor. Well, my new Asian female doctor was the doctor that Pfizer had in mind, because one look at her and an erection would dissipate in seconds. And she could palm a basketball with her hands, so that really didn't work out well. Many of my stories also focus on my marriage and confirm the stereotype that Jewish men make the best husbands. Thalia is the lucky beneficiary of centuries of Jewish male natural selection, where we make excellent providers, devoted husbands, involved fathers, and the ability to sustain an argument with our wives has been bred out of us. Thalia's name is mentioned 215 times in 216 pages. The stories are all 80 to 85% true, so she can't sue me for defamation of character. In actuality, she is my muse. In fact, in Greek mythology, Thalia is a muse of comedy. She is an amazing and multi-talented woman. She's a really good sport, and she's the love of my wife. And since I'm now retired and she is still working, I'm a kept man, and let's face it, I'm eye candy for her. Okay, another story in my book is when I went on a job interview. I graduated from college. Unfortunately, I did not go into one of the big three Jewish majors, medicine, law, or accounting. I had a double major, marketing and management, a killer GPA, and I started working with an employment agency. And they wanted to send me on a job interview with Maidenform. And I said, I don't want to be a bra salesman. And they said, no, it's a management trainee position. So I said, oh, so I'm going to be a management training bra salesman? Does that mean I have a small territory to cover? The first question the human resources man asked me was, what do you know about our products? And I said to him, my Jewish Ashkenazi brain just reacted. I said, well, in the past I've had problems with your snaps. He didn't crack a smile, he just wrote it down. I knew at that point in time I was in trouble. We got into an argument. I claimed the Wonder Bra was false advertising, and he didn't appreciate that. What got me escorted out of the building, though, was I asked him how long I'd have to be in bras before I could get into the panties. And now, hopefully, you can understand why my daughter-in-law, Allison, has not read my book and, in fact, asked for a discount. Excuse me, a refund. And I told her all sales are final. So, I'd like to read you another story. And the name of this story is Tradition. I first noticed Jill during Rosh Hashanah services at town. It was my first semester at Boston University, and I had come home for the Jewish holidays. On Rosh Hashanah, we believe that God opens the book of life to chronicle the fate of the wicked, the righteous, and the intermediate class. We spend the next 10 days reflecting and repenting. Then on Yom Kippur, the book is sealed and our fate is determined. As usual, I had a lot to atone for. Jill was in the choir, and she caught my eye right away. I should have been asking God for forgiveness for my sins and transgressions from the past year, and hopefully putting in a good word for the upcoming year. But instead, I was fixated on the clinginess of her choir robe. She wasn't my usual type, which to the annoyance of my parents included any female of non-Jewish persuasion. However, with her long curly brown hair, wide smile, and curvy physique, I felt a primal attraction. I thought, my God, what has become of me? It's like I'm being pulled by centuries of Jewish breeding. The attraction was downright Talmudic. I found myself humming the song Tradition from Fiddler on the Roof, and like Tevye, I felt compelled to throw my hands up in the air and start dancing. My thoughts may have been inappropriate, but if viewed within a biblical context, I was simply honing in on the sections of the Bible that featured a lot of begetting. I wanted to follow in the traditions of the patriarchs. Because of my obsession with Jill, I spent more time in the synagogue than usual, and less time outside with my friends smoking cigarettes. While reading the prayer book, bowing, humming along to the Hebrew songs, and genuflecting, I was thinking about our future together and asking the questions any prospective Jewish groom would ask himself. Which country club should host our wedding? Did her father own a successful business I can join and hopefully have no sons to share it with? Did her grandparents have money? I knew I had to become a better person for my betrothed, so I had to atone for all of my sins and start the new year with a clean slate. During the high holidays, we recite a prayer, which is a confession of our sins. While the prayer compromises 44 potential sins, I tended to abuse some significantly more than others. For example, I had to ask forgiveness for the mistakes I committed with endless babbling. Has God read my stories? The mistakes I committed through negative speech. Negative speech is my native tongue. The mistakes I committed willfully and unintentionally. Okay, I can understand willfully, but unintentionally? Seriously? I decided that it was smartest to wait until after the holidays to ask Jill out. I wanted to be sin-free before I did. After, who knows? At first, I didn't think anything of it when Jill said I could pick her up after sundown on Saturday night. But then, I pieced it together. She was in the temple choir. She couldn't go out until after the Sabbath was over. Jill was a conservative view. Jill. Something wasn't kosher, and apparently it was me. For my future bride, however, I was willing to make sacrifices, with the exception of cheeseburgers and bacon, of course. What I didn't know was that she was the cantor's daughter. The cantor is an important part of this synagogue, leading the congregation in song and prayer from the altar. He also helps 12-year-old Jewish boys prepare for their bar mitzvahs, teaching them how to sing in Hebrew from the Torah in front of their family, friends, and the entire congregation. Unfortunately, I had a bad history with my congregation's cantor. I had been a terrible Hebrew school student. There was a hobby shop across the street from the temple that sold Jews' copies of Mad magazine. The money that I was supposed to donate to charity to plant trees in Israel went towards my reading collection instead. Hopefully the trees were going to be planted in the Palestinian section so I wouldn't have to feel as bad. Since I spent too much time with Alfred E. Newman, I was ill-prepared to sing what turned out to be 59 lines of Hebrew. Needless to say, the cantor was not pleased with my total lack of proficiency, as I couldn't read, write, or speak the language. After my lousy performance, I was in no position to ask out his daughter, but I was determined to win her hand anyway. Going into her family business was totally out of the question. Despite being at a disadvantage, I wanted to make a good impression. As a graduate of the Eddie Haskell School of Suckups, I was skilled at charming the parents of my victims. Dates. On the night of my first date with Jill, I put on my winning smile. How nice to meet you, Mrs. Perlmutter. What a lovely home you have. I know I'm a week late, but I hope you have a very happy and healthy new year. How nice. Jill tells me you belong to our temple. You must know my husband. Izzy, come downstairs and meet Jill's little friend. Like Charleston Heston in the Ten Commandments, Cantor Ishak Perlmutter regally descends the staircase wearing a robe and slippers and carrying a Bible. I instantly felt like Edward G. Robinson dancing around the golden calf. This can't be good, I thought. Izzy, do you remember Herman Lentz? He's a nice Jewish boy and a member of our congregation. He's taking out our Jill tonight. Cantor Perlmutter said, Herman Lentz. Herman Lentz. Your Jewish name wouldn't be Chaim, would it? Oh, he remembers me. Maybe he doesn't remember what a pain in the ass I was. Happy and healthy New Year, Cantor Perlmutter. How good to see you again. I really enjoyed the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services this year. They were some of your best. He wasn't buying any of my schmaltz. He said, so what are you planning on doing with your life, Chaim? As much as I hate my name, Chaim is worse. I used to ask him to call me by my Judeo-Christian name instead, which of course he refused to do. Our battles have been of biblical proportion. For example, I didn't want to wear a yarmulke indoors, as I read in Ann Lander's column that it was rude to wear a hat in the house. Fortunately, when he was in the yeshiva studying to become a cantor, he hadn't minored in circumcision and become a moil as well. If he had, I probably would have sounded like Barry Gibb from the Bee Gees and sung my 59 lines of Hebrew in a high falsetto. I'm going to Boston University as an accounting major, sir. He shook his head sadly. Not pre-med? My condolences to your parents. Apparently, he remembered everything. It was hopeless. The Titanic had hit the iceberg and was going down fast. I don't recall seeing you in Temple much since your bar mitzvah, Chaim. I thought, you didn't see me in Temple much before my bar mitzvah either, Izzy. Up against the ropes, swaying to side and front to back, I looked like a Hasidic Jew in the midst of morning prayer. Chaim, tonight you are taking out my angel, the joy of my life, my precious Jill Amy Perlmutter. You better behave yourself. And then it hit me. I was taking out the cancer's little princess, Jill Amy Perlmutter, a true JAP. I knew in that moment that Jill and I were not destined to end up together. We wouldn't have any little Jews or Jewesses. In fact, our first date was probably going to be our last. Despondent, my thoughts drifted back to my high school girlfriend, Colleen. Colleen was not Jewish, and my parents hated her. Both points that worked in her favor. Although her parents admitted the many positives of having a Jewish son-in-law, they hated me too. She was Irish, and she had a beautiful smattering of freckles across her cheeks. She had a Catholic schoolgirl ivory snow beauty about her. When she wore a pleated skirt and sweater, I couldn't control myself. Had she also been a cheerleader, the ultimate prize for a Long Island Jew, I would have proposed to her. Cantor Perlmutter and Colleen's father were diametrically opposed, as Cantor epitomized the Jewish religion, and Colleen's father hated the Jews. Despite their fundamental differences, they had two things in common. First, neither of them liked me. Second, they both refused to use my Judeo-Christian name. And the names they used instead sounded alike. The Cantor called me Chaim, and Colleen's father called me Hyman. I knew that Colleen's father's comments, taunts, and his insistence on mangling my name were deliberate attempts to bother me, to break Hyman. The irony was that Colleen and I dated for over a year and had a lot of fun together. As it turns out, I was not